If there's anyone joining in from the public that'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function within Zoom, and I'll ask you to unmute yourself and you can make a comment. All right, we have Will Marks. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Will Marks, and I am here tonight to follow up on a email message that a colleague of mine, Louise Williams, and I sent you on February 4th. The purpose of speaking tonight is to reiterate our interest in seeing the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board reconfirm their recommendation of, I think it's called a Tier 3 recommendation for $4 million for building and site enhancements at the John P. Top Green Community Center. And I appreciate the work that you do on behalf of everybody here in Raleigh and for hearing what I have to say this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Anyone else have any comments? Or did anyone? Well, no, that's fine. Any other comments tonight?
I don't see anybody else's hand raised, so it doesn't look like it.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll move on then to, we have two presentations tonight, and then we have a couple action items. So the first presentation is on the Upper Lake Durant Nature Preserve by Brian Smith.
All righty, thank you. Let me get my screen up for folks here and let me know when you can see that.
Yep, we see it. Thank you.
Great. I am joined this evening by my co-conspirators, Kevin Boyer from Engineering Services in the Stormwater Division, and Dr. Barbara Dahl, who will do the majority of the speaking, but I'll kick it off just with our outline, let you guys know sort of why we're here and what we know so far and where we're going next. We're going to talk about the Upper Lake at Durant. You can see here on the map, there's two different lakes, a lower lake and an upper lake, if you're not familiar with the park. Both of these dams needed work. We've completed work on the lower dam, and we're going to talk tonight about the area around the upper lake, and specifically the dam itself is in need of repair. And we've done a little bit of work to understand sort of user needs and function of the entire area around the upper lake. So what we know so far is that doing nothing is not an option. In 2006, when Tropical Storm Alberto came through, we had a lot of water dropped on Raleigh, and that caused some immediate emergency repairs to be done on the dam here at Lake Johnson. This is what you see in the outflow after that storm. It also led to a study. Kevin will tell you a little bit more.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you just for a second. I see there was a comment that Louise Williams was in the waiting room. Michael, I'm wondering if you saw her in there and she was wanting to have some public comment, speak in the public comment portion. We can either try to let her speak real quick right now or after your presentation.
Yeah, I don't see her as listed in the attendee group here. I can put the link in the chat if somebody has the email address to send it to her.
Yeah. Okay, we'll try to work that out then. Mr. Marks, if you just want to let her know that we didn't see her in there, and if she can try to call back in maybe. And then Mr. Smith, if you would like to continue, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we know at this point that we need to do some repairs based on the study that was done in 2013, prompted by some of the events around Tropical Storm Alberto. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We know that there are 4 alternatives based on a study that we've done that Dr. Dahl is going to talk about. And next, this will be put in front of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, and then we'll go into a design process once there's a final recommendation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kevin to talk about stormwater's role in this whole process.
Thanks, Brian. Many of you may know that part of the role of stormwater management is to monitor and track the condition and function of city-owned dams and spillways of lakes the city owns or has an interest in, such as roadways and easements. Specifically for the Upper Lake at Durant Nature Preserve, stormwater management contracted for the 2013 initial assessment of the dams and spillways of the two lakes. And we arranged for the funding of the study of the lake that we'll be talking about through some grant funding from Clean Water Management Trust Fund, as well as stormwater capital funds. We also coordinated the lake study with Park and other city staff, and Dr. Barbara Dahl and her staff at North Carolina State University. Next slide, please, Brian. The city operates our lakes oversight through what was called loosely the Lakes Program, but that was initially named the Lake Preservation and Development Policy, first adopted in 1994 by City Council. Its initial purpose was preserving lakes to the mutual benefit of the city and the lake owner. It was updated in 2006 to clarify some legal authority about the privately owned lakes. And more recently, in the fall of 2020, it was revised and readopted by City Council, also renamed the Lake Management Evaluation Program. And that change added flexibility to the policy for choosing best solutions for lake, not necessarily a preservation alone. It also set forth expectations for city staff to inform the public about possible changes to lakes and to receive input from the public about those changes, and defined roles of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission and City Council in decisions about changes to lakes. Our timeline for the work at Upper Durant Lake, again, 2013, the initial assessment of the dams and spillways at the two lakes. 2017, we applied for the grant funding and secured it, and then conducted the study. Dr. Dahl of NC State in 2018, 2019, completed that in first month of 2020. And it waited a while to be rolled out to the public while the Lakes policy was being worked out, and Lakes program, and also COVID slowed everything down somewhat. And then for the future, in March of this year, March 4th, we're taking it to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission for their consultation and possible recommendation to City Council, and then on to City Council, depending on SMAC's action, and then later for design and construction and applying for additional grant funds. I'll turn it over to Dr. Barbara Dahl of NC State to tell you about the lake assessment and the 4 alternatives we evaluated.
Right. Now, are you seeing my, hold on, sorry. It's doing that thing again. All right, I'm gonna have to do this a little different. I apologize.
No problem. Every single one of us has been in this position. Don't you worry.
That's right.
It's doing that thing again from where it puts it on the opposite screen.
Oh,
Did the
yeah.
stimulus. Okay. So, so you're seeing it like you're not going to see it. I'm gonna have to do it this way.
Right. We see it, but I guess it's not.
You're going to see my, yeah, it's not the presentation view, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm glad to be here tonight, and we're going to work with that as it is. My animation stuff will not come in, unfortunately, so I'll have to work with that. So for our study, it covered several elements. We wanted to first look at the deficiencies. As Brian mentioned, there's some, damage to the spillway and the embankment, and so that needed to be addressed. A focus was also to diversify some of the habitat that's there other than just open lake, to look at other opportunities, perhaps try to improve water quality and expand educational opportunities, also kind of coupling with that diversity. And then the trying to ensure a long-term viability for that area. So kind of keeping the expense down for the future, and as kind of more storms come in, recognizing the potential for damage. So we did a first kind of two-part process. One is an existing conditions survey of the site, where that included everything from surveying the elevations or the topography, how deep the lake was, how much sediment had accumulated. We looked at the watershed, modeled some of the flows or hydrology through there. We looked at water quality, and we even did an assessment of what's living out in the upstream of the lake. And then a big focus of our work was developing some concept designs. And as they've mentioned, there's 4 possible options that I'm going to share with you tonight. So the existing condition, what we have out there is that we have a damaged outlet structure here that's in need of repair. Then there's a big concrete spillway that is undermined and has some cracking and problems, and a lot of erosion downstream of that. About 20% of the lake is filled with sediment, so it's lost that capacity to store water. And so you can see this is where the sediment was mapped out, and it's about a total of 12,500 cubic yards of material that has accumulated since that lake was built. Also, we found that that sediment that has accumulated is not hazardous. We found that the existing configuration is not really providing any flood control benefit. The water quality benefit was moderate of the lake, but the aquatic habitat was poor to fair according to North Carolina bioclassification. The 4 design alternatives I want to just quickly review is: 1, to leave the lake as is, kind of repair and replace the existing structures. We looked at 2 types of wetlands. I'll quickly show the difference. They're very similar. One we're calling the stormwater wetland because it's mostly focused on water quality, and one's a habitat wetland, number 2. And we also looked at the potential of restoring a stream and floodplain with some wetland system there. Whoops. So for the lake as is, I've got the cost at the top. This would require a new spillway being constructed, a new outlet structure, which would be moved over more towards the center. There's some eroding channels coming into the lake that would need to be stabilized at the downstream end. So we show having some structures there. And we looked at removing a portion of the sediment in the upper part of the lake. And so that's the cost range based on some of the variability that may be experienced with that work. The stormwater wetland, the first one, includes these areas of shallow water where you would have wetland plants. It would have also deeper pools where you would have some fish and kind of get that habitat diversity. There are 3 berms that would step the water down because we have elevation change across the lake that's there. So each one of those steps is 2 foot of drop. You still would have to repair the spillway that's there. And these berms would also have outflow weirs. We show these concrete labyrinth type weirs, and we show lowering the dam by a few feet. The habitat wetland's very similar, except for it only has 2 berms and takes a much bigger drop up at the upper part of the lake so that you get a larger contiguous wetland area for habitat. Again, it would still have those features of shallow and deep water with emergent wetland plants and deep water, and would still require the repairs to the spillway and changes to the dam. The stream restoration would establish a kind of defined meandering stream down that kind of valley, similar to what might have been there. It would have floodplain. You would lower the dam quite a bit more. And then we looked at including some wetlands out in the floodplain of that creek. But this would be water in a stream and then would come out onto the banks in bigger storms. And the steps are made, many more steps like rock steps through that channel every half a foot drop instead of those big concrete weirs. It would be these boulder steps. The final part of our process is we did a lot of cost estimate, as I mentioned, and we looked at comparing the 4 options using a tool called multi-criteria decision analysis. We looked at 8 variables that were considered important to this parks and stormwater engineering program. These are the 8 variables there shown in the box, and the variables are rated by their importance, which kind of protecting the downstream lake, reducing that risk being the highest because a big investment's already been made there. And then each option is rated according to each one of these categories, and then they're multiplied by the ranking score, and you get a total score. And the highest value down here for the total score means it's the best rated option of the 4. And in this case, the habitat wetland is ranked number 2, followed very closely by the stormwater wetland. And then you can the other 2 quite a bit behind because of higher cost and risk. So that's all I have. I'll turn it back over, stop my share and turn it back over to Brian.
Thanks, Barbara. I will give you guys a little bit of the public engagement that was done and the approach used. Since we're doing this collaboratively with stormwater, there's both the marketing communications from PRCR as well as stormwater that we put together an outreach plan, had a project website already in place, updated that with the results of the study, and put out a press release as well as sent emails to about the 14-ish thousand people on our Gov delivery list to let them know that we are going to do a publicinput.com survey as well as 2 public meetings. So that went out just after the first of the year on January 4th. And we had 2 virtual public meetings, one on the 12th and one on the 26th. And we had great participation in the publicinput.com survey, which yielded a ton of information that's actionable and that we can use as good input and feedback. The virtual public meetings were lightly attended, probably 10 to 15 people once you get the staff subtracted from that total. So it was wonderful to have the number of full comments that we got written in the engagement process that we did through publicinput.com. There's about, somewhere in that area of 500 participants in that survey overall, and 200 of those went ahead and wrote actual comments that we can use. So I'll show you one more slide that gives you some of the output from that and shows you that 3 of the things that we were asking people to comment on rose to the top here. And that are areas for wildlife refuge is something that's very important to folks in terms of their user experience at Durant Nature Preserve, the water quality, both in upper and lower lake, and the hiking on the trails, which fortunately is something that won't change. We can enhance it a bit and we can incorporate into the plans, how people are going to experience it, but the hiking won't be impacted by the repairs to the lake. So this was the sort of Likert scale types of information that we collected. That's the direct solicited input. The unsolicited comments we put in a word cloud quickly for you. And I'll say that in your agenda you'll see the link to the actual project webpage as well as a little bit more detailed description than we would normally put, given we were going to do a little bit shorter presentation. So the overall input that we got in the comments sort of mirrored what we saw here in the Likert scale, with the addition of things like fishing and biking. People were asking us not to allow those activities in the upper lake after we go ahead and do this project. So those were some of the ways that people were able to provide input. And I will go ahead and move to our next steps, which have been mentioned, that was going to be based on all of this feedback and the study recommended option to the Stormwater Management Advisory Council planned for the 4th of March. If that is an alternative that is other than a lake and the stormwater management folks accept that recommendation, it would then go to City Council for a final sign-off. Once there is a final recommendation, it'll go into the design process from there. So as I said, there's a link to the project webpage where you can get more detail. And but we're happy to answer questions if folks want to take time for those. If there are any right now, we'd be happy to answer.
Great, thank you all. Does anyone have any questions for Brian, Kevin, or Barbara?
Yeah, I do. Of the 4 options, do you guys look at the collateral construction damage in either of those processes? And is there one that has less impact to the surrounding trail system and forest to the others?
We didn't, none of them show impact to the existing trail system that's there. So we didn't really have to consider that. And then we did look at construction cost for them as well as long-term maintenance.
Okay. Will construction, I'm trying to visualize what's out there. Is there an access route for heavy equipment to get down there, or are we going to have to cut a construction access road to get to it?
And I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I assume that we would use similar access as what they use for the lower dam construction. Now it would have to branch off of that, but that would have to be coordinated and to limit, I would assume that would need to limit the existing use of the park and disturbance, you know, to limit disturbance of kind of critical habitats or trails or, you know, things important to wildlife or people.
So
Okay.
there will be to jump in on that, there will be more look at that specifically when you get into the design process. The 4 alternatives don't differ a whole lot in terms of what that, you know, access in and out piece will be. But obviously, given the nature preserve designation, one of the most important things will be to limit that disturbance in and out of the site. There is not full access to it right now, but there's going to be disturbance of at least some area in order to do the work that needs to be done to the dam. But we can certainly limit it and will limit it throughout the design process.
Yeah, these designs were what you would kind of call maybe a little bit more than schematic design. So they're not all the way to like construction ready documents. So they, you know, really looking at quantities of earth moving, volumes of water and things like that. So
Understood. Yeah, then I just want to raise that as a concern for the future efforts is how are you getting excavators back there?
Oh, absolutely.
With the smallest footprint possible.
Yep, that'll be a big piece of what we talk about in the design process. Appreciate the comment.
Any other questions, Christina? I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening. I was wondering, in regards to the citizen engagement portion, how many people is the area that surrounds this park, and how many were you? I saw you had 1.4 thousand comments, but I'm wondering how big is that area and how many residences does this incorporate?
So one of the mechanisms used was on Nextdoor, and that reached about 76 neighborhoods around and adjacent to Durant, and got about 16,000 people there. We also used the existing list that Housing and Neighborhoods has for home associations. I don't have that exact number off the top of my head, but I'm happy to give it to you. And or we can go back through and pull the information from the outreach plan so that you guys can have a better idea of exactly what was done. There's in publicinput.com an ability to generate some maps and show you where some of the feedback, exactly where it came from. So if that's of interest, we're happy to share it.
Yeah, I would love that. And then I'm just wondering if before the project, knowing through all of these tools that you use through Nextdoor, do you set a goal of how much community engagement you expect for a project? So if there weren't as many comments as there were, would you guys keep continuing that outreach, or how does that work?
Sure, I've looked at some of my colleagues in planning to speak to the exact continuum that projects in Parks and Rec go through. So there's about 5 different levels of public engagement. This is sort of on that second level of just above information sharing, information and collect input. So for that level of what we were in that larger process, we're probably a little bit above and beyond for this particular project, just given the interest in this particular park.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a quick clarification question. So on the survey, were the 4 options, I think they were 4, were they given to the public? And if so, how did they react to that?
They were presented so the study was available as well as a summary of it. So they had the 4 options themselves.
There wasn't a question of sort of which do you prefer, or is there a leaning toward one way or the
Correct.
other?
It wasn't presented in that way for people to
Okay.
provide rank order feedback.
Gotcha.
We were most interested in making sure that we understood the user experience that people are interested in and what they're getting from an experience there at Durant, and making sure that we fully understand and account for that in the process.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, given that a lot of this damage was done by a freak storm, I'm just curious. I was looking through the report and it seems that a lot was done to model the 100-year 24-hour event. I'm just curious to kind of prevent further damage. Should there be consideration to design to a larger storm, especially since I think it was in 2018, we had 300-year storms back to back in a 2-week period.
Right. We did not, I don't know if Jack, he's not on with me. He did the modeling, some of that, and I don't know if he looked at the 500 years well, even though the 100's in that report. But we frequently do look at that. But we kind of use the 100 as the kind of criteria for comparing those, and that ranking of those as to how well it protects the downstream lake, how much kind of flood control benefit you got in the design. So, the stream restoration has a lowest because you end up removing the embankment, and that, lets a lot of water go through and puts more pressure on the downstream lake and embankment. So I could ask him. He's not on tonight with us. So sorry.
That's fine. I'm just curious because I see that the dam is being lowered with both of the wetland options, that existing dam. And I'm just thinking for this larger storm events that seem to be happening, I mean, just like what we're going through now, and then the 2 months for 2021, just maybe consideration should be maybe not lower that dam as much as it's being shown.
Right. And that could come into the final design where you tweak on there. We were trying to, with the wetland, keep the embankment low for the risk of embankment, because when you do have severe storms, embankment failure is a big issue. But also with lowering the, existing lake, you have so much water stored. By bringing that down to have a wetland, because you bringing the water level down, you give more storage that way. So it would be, you want to balance that out. So you kind of keep the embankment lower, that is to some degrees provide some benefit. But when you take a lot of it out for the stream restoration, then you kind of do let it all go through to the next downstream impoundment. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I'm an engineer and I design stormwater systems all the time. And so
Okay. All right. So you got this right.
Yeah. So I'm just knowing that it was because a catastrophic storm hit it that we're seeing all these issues today, just putting a little bit more consideration into, now that we have an opportunity, designing it for a larger storm, because larger storms seem to be the norm.
Right. Unfortunately, most of the ones we've looked at, that have caused severe flooding in the eastern part of the state, have been over a 100-year storm. That they've actually been, not all the way to 500, but they're exceeding 100-year storms in a lot of instances.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Yep, Lindsay.
My Zoom was acting up, so I apologize if this was on the presentation to answer this, but how much outreach was done that wasn't digital? And if there was any, my Zoom's been kind of defiant. So are you doing any non-digital outreach is my question.
Thinking through what we've done, I think most of it would have been, web, social media, that type of thing. So you're right, that would have been a segment that, wasn't necessarily touched in this particular case. With the public meetings were virtual, and the everything else was web-based. So there weren't mailers in this case.
Brian, we did have signage at the site that did direct people to the survey tool. Yeah. And so anybody that was visiting Durant actually was able to see the signage and and were alerted to the survey and the meeting.
That's true. I did see that.
Well, that's good. I haven't been out there in a while, so, with the rain. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
if
you.
there's not any other questions, I'm going to suggest we move on because we have a busy evening tonight. Any other questions or comments for the group?
It looks like the person who was trying to join to make a comment joined and has their hand raised. If you
So if you'd like to make a motion for us to go back to the public input, that would be, we could do so at this time.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll make a motion that we go back to public input since.
Great. And
So-
Christina, I saw a second. Okay, great. Thank you. So Michael, if you want to let Lynette speak to us, that'd be wonderful.
Yep, Lynette Williams, I just asked you to unmute yourself, so feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
You are, we hear you.
Okay. Am I to speak on the project you just presented or on the Chavis project? Because that's what my concerns were about.
You can, this is considered to be the public open comment period, so you can speak to whatever you would like to.
Okay,
For 3
thank you very
minutes.
much.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you getting me in. I tried for quite a while. It was a task tonight.
Sorry about that.
Right. But at any rate, the comments that I'd like to make tonight are related to the culturally interpretive project that for Chavis that we were involved in over the last few months. And I recognize as I continue to think about the confusion that we've had was that we were expecting, when I say we, members of the advisory committee who are also members of the Chavis PLG were involved because we thought we were working on creating an exhibit that would be used in the Heritage Plaza since it was removed from the phase 1 of the master plan. And this was supposed to be an opportunity to have something representative at the time of the reopening of the park in June. Well, what has occurred is that that consultant group apparently had a much broader scope of work that they were doing, which was doing interpretive analysis of the entire park and not spending sufficient time on the Heritage Plaza, which has created a lot of concern amongst those of us who were participating in it. And we didn't realize that there were 3 groups that they were getting input from. One was staff, another one was something called a public group, and then it was the people who had worked on the John Chavis master plan until the last day for us, which was January 21st, because we couldn't get some of our questions answered. And one of them was segregation to integration. Where did that come from? We never heard of that before. It certainly was not discussed over the 2-year period we worked on the master plan. And segregation to integration is something that kind of hits home when people throw that at you without some background as to what this is. And we were told, in fact, I asked the question because I was some black and white panels of board or whatever, and it looked strange. And I was told we'll circle back to it. It's not going to be there. We'll take it out. And then another committee member followed up with me and raised the question. And we were told that we would follow up later on in the meeting. Well, that didn't happen. And the meeting ended. And that was our last meeting. So we don't have any knowledge of what is going in the Heritage Plaza. And that was something that I personally went to city administration and asked for. Mr. Carmona wasn't present during that time. He hadn't been hired, but Scott was present and knows that to be true, and the assistant city manager. So I am personally concerned that we're not getting what we asked for, what I thought we were asking for. If I don't know what's going in the Heritage Plaza, then nobody else knows in the public domain. And I'm real concerned about that and why segregation to integration has all of a sudden been put into the Chavis discussions and planning. The other thing is that because things were pushed so much, I think that they were getting confused, and I said they, the consultants, because I read the report and it talks about all this public input and people voting. Well, I didn't miss any of the advisory committee meetings, and I never had a chance to vote on anything. So I don't know where that came from unless it was the public group and the staff. But I will have to say that when things came to the advisory committee meetings, things seemed like they were already planned and set up. The exhibit designs, the schedule of when we would meet, the day we would meet, the time we would meet. There wasn't very much opportunity for us to say what would be best for us, what we like. There were a few things we were able to inject. Some of the things I wanted to see were pictures of people who lived in this area rather than folks that you would just pick from the museum, etc. For example, the legacy of military people. We have our own Tuskegee Airmen who were pilots who could be pictured in that document to give some representation for those things that we celebrate. And that's what we thought that the Chamber's project is, what we celebrate about our history, about things that have occurred and what we did during the process. And I think they may have been confused with the other groups that they had voting, but the advisory committee, which was made up predominantly of the Chavis PLG members, didn't vote on anything in the 3 meetings that I attended. The legacy of service one is a very important feature that we have always talked about, including wanting to raise money for P-51 Mustang to honor the Tuskegee
Ms.
Airmen.
Williams, I'm sorry. The 3 minutes is expired. I just
Okay.
am wondering if you could kind of wrap up your comments for now. Thank you.
All right. The only other thing is that we asked that they add something other than QR codes to the exhibits so that people who don't use technology can see printed text or either kiosks to get information. So those are things. There are things I think because we didn't have enough time to delve into it, that this project I have some concerns about it being complete and ready for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might suggest that if any board members have anything that they'd like to add, they could, but we might want to wait until after Luke's presentation. He is about to give a presentation on this very project, and then we could talk some more after that. Unless anyone has anything they'd like to add or say right now.
I'll save my comments after the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So Luke, I would say if you want to go ahead and give us an update on the
Jennifer.
cultural interpretive plan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Jennifer,
Yes, ma'am.
make sure you close out the public comment portion.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So if there's no other public comments, we'll go ahead and close that out then. Is there anyone else, Michael?
Nope, nobody else.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. And we'll move on to Luke's presentation.
I could be missing, but I don't see Luke on the presentation on the as a panelist listed right now.
Okay. Oscar or Scott, you guys want the presentation?
One of the panel, one of the persons that worked on the project. Isn't that Inga Kennedy?
Yeah, I thought I saw Inga on there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see if we can get Luke on the call. If you wanted to maybe just give us about a minute or two.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll call and check.
Okay, should we, could we go ahead and move on to the Neuse River Blueway plan?
Yes, please.
Okay, that'd be great. Emma, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Let me just share my screen really quick. All right, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So I was here last month to talk about the Neuse River Blueway Plan. Just for information, we've incorporated some edits since I've seen y'all last, back tonight for y'all to take action. So just a quick refresher, Neuse River Blueway Plan is a comprehensive effort to improve public access to and awareness of the Neuse River as a valuable natural resource and recreational asset. The plan provides a long-term vision for a creation of a cohesive paddling trail that'll connect over 2,000 acres of parks, greenway land, and open space along the 25 miles of the Neuse River that flow through the city of Raleigh and Wake County. Here is the full Neuse River Blueway system all laid out. We have proposed river access points distributed to maximize flexibility and accessibility, creating more options for those 1 to 2 hour paddling trips that are ideal for casual users and recreation programs. Plan includes the addition of 6 new launches, Thornton Road, Lewisburg Road, Buffalo Road Athletic Park, Alvis Farm, Randley Farm, and Mild Plantation Road. And here are the changes that you would see in the document since you guys saw it last versus the final one that was uploaded and attached to the agenda tonight. So we have a new complementing the Neuse River Blueway section, page 82, a new river safety appendix on page 83. We addressed the comment that we had gotten from you all last month about us looking into the feasibility of expanding to the Walnut and Crabtree Creek somewhere in the future. So we added that sentence to page 25. And you'll notice that now the document is official City of Raleigh branding. So tonight, hoping for y'all to take action to approve the draft Neuse River Blueway Plan and recommend to City Council for adoption. Are there any questions? Great.
No,
Thank you,
thanks
Evan.
for picking up my comment. Appreciate that. I'll
Yeah,
move to approve it.
Did you move to approve, Dave?
Second. I did.
Oh,
Can I
great.
just make one small comment just to link this to a later conversation? I do think that these projects are of relative small scope and might be something we would consider including in our memo about the bond, and potentially spread an investment on the Neuse River along the entire corridor, not just one spot. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Brad. I heard a second from Lex. All right, all in favor? It might be easier in this context to just say, are there any not in favor? Say nay or raise your hand now. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Emma, for the presentation again.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We will move that forward to council then.
Awesome.
Okay, so is Luke with us yet for the, oh.
Yes, here. So sorry.
Oh, hey, Luke. No worries.
Are you ready for me or?
We are ready for you. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, once again, my apologies. I totally got my times crossed and I'm ready. I'm here. I'm ready to present. So go ahead. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Okay, Jorgen, can you see this presentation?
Yes. I
Okay.
can see it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so thank you for your time this evening. My name is Luke Wallenbeck. I'm the project manager for this cultural heritage interpretive plan. And I would like to take some time today to run through an update on the project. Also, through the presentation, you'll see some images, and at any time, if I just sort of peppered them into the presentation. If at any time you want me to stop me and ask me a question, I'd be happy to answer those questions. Okay, so as I begin, I just briefly wanted to touch on the background of the project, origins, and the scope. You may remember a lot of this from the time I came to present in November, so I'll just be brief. Council requested this cultural heritage interpretive plan to be completed for the park campus last February. We've been working hard since. The goal was to create a first phase exhibit installation as well outside the old carousel house with a budget of $150,000 total. This first part of the project scope involved a lot of research and content development, community engagement, and developing a final interpretive plan. And this final interpretive plan is a high-level overview that will guide future investment. Scope item number 2 was the design, fabrication, and installation of a phase 1 exhibit. And the goal is to follow the guidelines from the plan and to be located outside the carousel house. I added this note about the Heritage Plaza because some confusion about it. The funding for the design and construction of that will come in a future phase. Tonight, we have joining us the lead consultant on the project, Therese Huffman, and our other consultants on the team that have been a great support, Inga Kennedy and Juliet Cutler, and they'll be here to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So our public engagement strategy involved an advisory committee made up of community members who've been actively engaged in the park in previous projects as well. And we had 3 public meetings. We had information available on the project website through raleighnc.gov. We also hosted a publicinput.com page for feedback throughout the project. We located keepers of history, had a lot of phone calls to get extra information in both community members, but also in some relevant collections related to the park history. This was the schedule for the public meetings. November 5th, November 1st ended up being a pre-recorded presentation because we were planning on meeting in person, but you know, the rate of COVID escalation, we had to make that adjustment to do this pre-recorded presentation. But we also had some comment box and physical presentation boards at the community center. And then we had our last virtual public meeting, January 14th. Oops, jumping ahead here. So now I want to walk you briefly through the plan, touching on each section. I hope everyone was able to review the plan that was sent out previously. The plan was built on the foundation of previous planning efforts. The revised master plan in 2014, South Park Heritage Walk Report, also in 2014, strategic implementation plan that followed, and the National Register of Historic Places application in 2016. The plan team sought to understand who visits, what interpretive experiences are nearby, and what should the outcomes be after visiting the park's interpretive elements. So these are some of the questions that we asked to get at that information. What should visitors think, feel, and do as a result of interpretation? How can we understand the hidden history and significance of the park? Feel that the park is a special place that welcomes everyone. Feel that the park is a symbol of African-American agency and identity. Enjoy the park and be inspired to share and create memories. And engage as stewards, volunteers, and advocates. So these outcomes drove the key messages and design concepts, as well as programming. So the next section of the plan organizes interpretive content into a series of key messages that are built on visitor outcomes. So here's the 6 high-level messages. John Chavis, the African-American teacher, preacher, and veteran. Segregation to integration, the story of agency, power, and identity. A place to gather and celebrate, remembering community and culture. Number 4, a legacy of service, the relationship to the armed forces. Number 5, athletics and athletes in the park, the notable sports legacy and athletes. And then number 6, nature in my neighborhood, connection to the natural world. So the initial work was done to define a direction of these stories in the concept design section. These concepts express the look and feel of future elements with the understanding that they will evolve in future efforts. I've included some precedent images from each concept that speaks to each concept. So here on the left, you'll see the gateways concept, and that's there to, as a concept for the John Chavis story. And then we also, through the planning process, developed another concept for a music memory arch that could be located in another part of the park, really focused on the musical heritage of the period. The central image is the prismatic panels, and that is a concept that was developed for the segregation to integration story. The third on the right is the interpretive plinths. A legacy of service was the story that was speaking to, and that's a tall structure. You can see 10 feet tall and 2.5 feet wide, and they could be located in numerous parts of the park. The last three here are memory respites, and that's to highlight the story A Place to Gather. And in the center, we have monolithic sculpture. So the idea is that to honor the athletics and athletes in the park, this sculpture would be located over by the track itself. The image on the right is the precedent image shown for this immersive digital playscape. And the idea that that was supporting is the story of nature in my neighborhood. And there's more information on all of these concepts in the plan itself. Section 5 outlines possibilities for interpretive programs and events to help achieve visitor outcome goals. In the plan, we mention populations as partners as well. And so here you'll see there's programming talking about the general public, seniors and adults, children in K through 12 school groups, and young adults and college students. The next, we touch on implementation and priorities. And these identify investment priorities and create a framework for how the plan might be implemented over time. As we know, we have funding to pursue this first phase, but the future of the rest of the elements and stories will need to be funded by other money. And the element that was prioritized from the community engagement was the segregation to integration story. And one note about that is that that's sort of the words that we're using in the plan to describe it, but that's not, it won't, the goal isn't that it says that in a title anywhere. Just like the athletes and athletics wouldn't be a title on a piece, it's just part of what is the story in the plan. And then as it goes to design, it would be refined further. Okay, what else? So the total implementation cost for everything that we've developed here would be between $760,000 and $950,000. And there's some elements as well that rely on the full master plan being developed. As I mentioned, the story, segregation to integration story is the one that was chosen to move forward for the first phase exhibit. It's reflecting on the park through the context of segregation from the 1930s through the period when Raleigh began integrating public facilities in the 1960s and up to today. It's focusing on the unique way the park stands as a symbol of African-American agency and identity and remains a place of power and civic engagement for the Black community today. The approach is to have these two large panels standing at opposing angles, and the left panel would be in contrast to the right. And it would create a sense of feeling inside the exhibit. The exterior is more prismatic and the interior more formal and literal. So the inside is where we would have all of the literal content telling the story, images, etc. I included this to just show some of the content that we've developed. We have a great timeline that the consultant team developed, calling out key moments in history for the park and the African-American community. And it is much more than what you see here on the screen, but it covers the specific things that were happening in the park, but also some of the context in Raleigh and in the state and in the nation. And then we've also been building on the archive that we had through this process, adding images, making sure that the oral histories that were done are part of this archive and other source documents. So as we move forward, in the project with funding, that's going to be a great place for the next group, the next team to start their work. So moving forward, the next steps are to publish this final interpretive plan, finalize the exhibit details. Inside the new community center, we're looking at interior elements to connect to the story. Normally we do the mission and values signage for a new community center or even renovating some of the older ones. And so this time we're asking the design team for this project to help create historic signage as part of that mission and values work. And then proceed with fabrication and installation this spring. So with that, I'll stop. Love to hear any feedback from the Parks Board. And also, as I mentioned, we have Therese, Inga, and Juliet here as well.
Thank you, Luke. I'd like to open the floor, but first, Dr. Love, I know you've been involved in this. If you had any comments that you wanted to share.
Yes, I'd like to do that.
Great.
One concern that I had raised earlier was about, and Luke said they wouldn't use the title segregation to integration, because I realized that brings up a lot of negative feelings, because initially the park had many things. It had a train, it had a plane, it had a football stadium, and as integration happened, those things disappeared. So I'm curious to know exactly what the images will be in this exhibit. We haven't seen the final documentation. There are many pictures and images in the plan itself. You didn't get to see all of those unless you actually read the plan. So we had community involvement in selecting the actual images that would go in the windows at Chavis, but haven't had that same opportunity in this. Overall, the plan is reasonable, but not having the final images to go in that, it is a concern. So the question would be, will there be an opportunity in helping to determine what those images will be in that initial exhibit? That's a main concern. Overall, I think the document is fine, except we need to have that input on what that final piece is going to look like. And not only have, we had requested that there be not only voices, but where people who don't have the smartphones could actually get some data that's at the exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a main concern.
Thanks for your comments. Yeah. Luke, Inga, do you guys want to respond to that, or and this might be a good time? It sounds like that kind of parallels a little bit with what I heard from Ms. Williams earlier.
Well, I can. I think if Therese or Juliet or Inga are on the call, and this is a time to pop in and say hello. As far as for this particular, there was 2 points that were made. I think one is about the public engagement process moving forward for the exhibit design, and I think we've identified a strong timeline through some of the back and forth with the advisory committee, and we are in the process right now of trying to move that forward. So it's a good point. It's a great question of, should we come back to the advisory committee? Should there be a public viewing of the design as we move forward? So we have our Historic Resources and Museum Board. That is another public board available to us for reviewing documents and being a great, sounding board for historic exhibits. We could talk about another round of community engagement. So I think that's something that I need to probably bounce back and forth with some other folks to figure out what the best path forward is. And I'm sure we can find a way.
Okay. That would be good, because we actually met with Wilson, who did the artwork for the windows. and had several. So we knew exactly what was going to be in that final display.
Mhm. We want to make sure that we get it right. Absolutely. Like what goes in the ground and what's built, it needs to be right. It needs to be supported, needs to be loved. And we want to make sure that that happens. So thank you for that feedback. And the other question you had mentioned,
what are you going to call the exhibit?
what was it?
We still don't know what the exhibit is going to be called.
Like a title?
Yeah.
I haven't thought that it had to have a title. You stumped me. You stumped me on that one. Oh, the other question I remember is the digital online content.
Yes.
So yes, so embedded in many of these concepts, including the one that we're developing, we are going to have QR codes so that people can use their devices to link to online content. And so we've been working with our communications team and with the consultants to make sure that all the background is worked out, the formatting, etc. So we'll have the timeline available on the website. We'll have a lot more information. We've been talking about oral histories as well being available, linking from the piece to the website. So the great thing about that is that the piece itself doesn't have any moving parts that might get damaged in the weather or something like that. Most people have a device they can use to link to the website for that audio and visual and next layer of information. The title.
If I can also chime in, this is Juliet Cutler, and Dr. Love, I also want to mention that on the interior of this exhibit, we are intending to have a fair amount of text that does articulate some of the key points in history for the park, coupled with those images. So there will be information on the exhibit itself, as well as this, including some quotes from the oral histories that have been collected from the community. And then in addition, there will be this QR code, but we're still kind of debating that too, in terms of maybe there ought to be a URL there as well, that people who maybe don't know how to use QR codes could access. So we really are looking at providing some pretty robust content as part of this exhibition.
I appreciate that. Lots of seniors have been asking that question. What if we don't have a smartphone? How will we be able to appreciate the exhibit beyond just the pictures?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I see Beverly has a comment. Go ahead, Beverly.
Yes, and also from the senior point of view, and also from the youngest child point of view, lots of times busy parents are not going to pull out their phones and zap a QR code. And it's really important to have text, that words that people can learn and to associate with images to make the full connection. So I share Ms. Williams and Dr. Love's concern about having it be to 21st century, because we're straddling both of those pieces.
Absolutely. I hadn't heard comments earlier due to my tardiness, but yeah, so inside we'll have a lot of text, a lot of images telling the story. The idea of the website is that you get a much deeper level of information by going to, we can't provide all the content on those surfaces. Eventually you just run out of space. So that's the idea, is there would be a lot of content. This is not going to be an abstract art. This is going to be very informative, with full of stories and pictures directly about the park itself and the community in the park. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question, Carol? This is Therese. So yes, David Wilson, yes, he's a wonderful guy, and I'm also working with him. And so, keeping, staying very, very connected with what he's done, and love his work and everything else about him. But I also wanted to ask, you talked about having a title, and I'm wondering, do you have a title for the work that he's done inside the community center? Is there a title for the art class? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, there is. Yes, there is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Would you like a title for the we certainly know we're not going to call it segregation to integration. That was just that was an interpretive message theme,
Yeah.
statement. Would you think it would be helpful to have a title?
Not necessarily. I just wanted to be sure that there was nothing out there that said segregation to integration.
No, absolutely not.
And then I know that on the one side.
Yeah, no. It's just the big idea. It's the big idea, and you never say those words. That's not the point.
So on the one panel, the images would be in black and white, and on the other panel, it would be in color, if I remember correctly.
It might be a little bit more of a mixture now. We will be using more color inside, I think. So as we develop this, we're trying to think of the best way to really express these messages.
Okay.
The idea is, what is the best way to express these messages? Is what we're going for.
And Luke, could you remind us again of what the timeline is for this?
Yeah, we are mid-March. We are shooting for wrapping up the design work, and then fabrication beginning late March, and then installation. The goal is to have everything installed before June.
So I think I understand the sense of urgency I'm feeling a little bit from some of the folks that have talked tonight of let's make sure we get it right. It's about to go to fabrication here.
Yes,
we're wrapping it up.
Yeah, right.
Not quite yet.
Yeah,
there's still time. There's a lot of work to do. There's still time for more rounds of back and forth. What we don't have time though is for a long, public review process that goes on for weeks at a time. So that's we're trying to. We feel like we got a lot of great information from the planning process, and then that's why we've been trying to move it forward at this pace.
Okay, and I think Lindsay, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I couldn't see you.
Yes, yeah. I wanted to comment on two things with the QR codes. I'm glad that that's been mentioned, but something else in terms of being accommodating for folks with disabilities, like having the text, but also is there like a Braille option or an auditory option to really be as accommodating as inclusive so that as many people as possible can experience the exhibit? It sounds like it's going to be a real value add to the community, but so as many folks as possible can really take it in. Like the points have already been mentioned about, maybe seniors or children not having the QR code thing, but also folks who simply can't afford a smartphone, but then having that auditory and visual plus Braille would be inclusive, all inclusive for folks with different abilities. And then I'm seeing maybe the phrase segregation and integration needs to be revisited sooner, because I'm seeing it on all the documents, and if it's troubling, then maybe that needs to be evaluated sooner than later, especially with where that we are in the timeline for this.
It could certainly be. It was like we've said, the work that was done earlier to figure out what are the main stories that we want to tell, that phrase came up at that time, and we've just carried it through. But hearing, the feedback today, and at our last advisory committee, people brought that up as well, and we thought we had addressed it. But if it is, really troubling, then we can certainly change that. Those are just words on a page.
But they're not, though. They're not just words on a page, and that could really draw up painful emotions and memories for folks, and that's the feedback I've heard.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is because they're just words right now, we can easily change them to get the words that people want. Yeah, so we can put our heads together and come up with a different way to explain it. Yeah.
Jennifer, I've got a comment.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Dave.
Mainly to echo the other board comments coming forward. I'm hearing from this conversation that there's a gap in the public participation and the jump to fabrication documents, and I hear we're gonna work something out. I would like to see some sort of firm schedule to make sure that loop gets closed and everyone who we know has been participating doesn't feel surprised by what these final fabrication documents look like. I know your timeline is short, so it feels like some quick turnaround on meeting or workshop or whatever that process is to get a last check-in with the public is warranted.
Because we've had electronic meetings, and so it can be a slide presentation. It doesn't have to be elaborate, just actual images.
Dr. Love, I think I didn't hear the beginning of your statement. Can you say that again, please?
What was getting the information to us about the fabrication can be electronic, as we've had our Zoom meetings. It can be shown, in a slide presentation, what the final images are going to look like and what the text will be. We know pretty much. You got lots of images in the document itself. We just would like to see which ones are you going to use in that final product. And you've got the diaries and you've got quotes. Which ones are actually going to be chosen?
Is that a request to come back to the Parks Board and show that stuff maybe next month?
I don't think it's to the Parks Board. I think it's to the steering committee, if I'm hearing right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Dexter.
Yeah, and I think that was the point that I was going to make. I think that's why we have a lot of mistrust sometimes with community feeling like their voice was heard, or what they say and what other people interpret. And I think that becomes challenging a lot. And so when folks typically say, well, they don't hear us anyway, or our voice doesn't matter, and we not brush it off, but like we'll look into it. I think it's more than just looking into it. And I think Dr. Love and the PLG members of the steering committee, they did a lot of work and gave a lot of voice to this. And so I just want to make sure that that is seen, and words do matter. And I want us to realize that words do matter, and what we say matters a lot. And then real education of our history matters as well. And so making sure that we are inclusive in that communication, but also with the group that's been spearheading and leading from a community aspect, we need to make sure and make it a point for their voice to be heard through this. So thank you.
Okay. I think that message has come through loud and clear. What I need to do is go back and talk to the consultant team and find out when is the right time to have that review with the advisory committee's members, and then reach out to them and see about when that time can be. So trying to coordinate with everybody's schedules. So we can certainly do that.
Very good. Thanks, Luke.
Yep. All right.
Any other comments or questions before we move to the next item?
No, Jennifer, I just did want to say thank you for everybody's input, for community members who also chimed in on comment. You do have staff's commitment that they will go ahead and start working on that right away, get some community input on the design so we can make sure that we're capturing the community's needs and history right. And so we'll start on that right away.
Sounds great. Thank you. Very good. Well, thank you all for the update. So,
okay.
Yep. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda now. So we already covered the Neuse River Blueway. So we are moving on to the Parks Bond update, and we're going to have a presentation from Stephen Bentley first.
Yes.
To go over some of the survey results. Everybody, thanks for participating in that. I think we had full participation, which was great.
We did. Yes.
Awesome.
Luke has stopped sharing his screen, so I think I can now. Give me 1 second here. All right. Share. All right, can you see my screen now? Hopefully.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
I can find the unmute.
Cool. I might have had the same problem as Dr. Dahl. Let me try in the beginning. Okay, full screen. Everybody see full screen? Okay, good. All right. Good evening and thanks. I have about 20 slides just to cover a little bit what the City Council asked the board to look at. Some really positive results from the survey, and I'll go through a little bit about schedule. And since I can't see you all, I'll rely on Jennifer to tell me to stop, or someone has their hand raised. So just a reminder to the group that the council asked the board to look at really three areas: things that have changed over the last year, lessons learned by changes in community priority, not only related to COVID, but the community's priorities around social justice. Also to take into key considerations related to financial considerations related to COVID and ongoing impacts to the city. So some changes from last year. Welcome Oscar, welcome a new city manager, welcome in the future a new police chief, and actually we also have a new fire chief. So some changes organizationally. Significant citywide initiatives with the passing of the housing bond, a lot of work going on in the Newbern corridor related to the Wake BRT. We're working through our Greenway master plan. The city has updated its strategic plan. Those are just, a snapshot of some things, but those are things that really influence the work of the Parks Department. Overall, just this is kind of repetitive to you all, but we shut down for a while. We had restrictions in and continue to have restrictions in our operations. We figured out ways to program adaptively. We've increased our trail usage, and we've covered that in the past. Some locations have had 300% increase, and obviously related to COVID, we've had significant budget and revenue impacts. So from a timeline perspective, I shared this last month. We talked last month in January. We sent just this past few weeks a survey to you all, and tonight we'll talk about your comments. Our proposal as a staff is that we'll take your comments from last month and tonight and the outcomes of the survey and work with Jennifer and Beverly, our chairwoman and vice chairwoman, on a memorandum, and we'll allow them to edit the messages that staff come up with to ensure that that message gets to the council in March. And that was the expectation of the council, was that report back to us basically in 45 days so we can take your comments into consideration when they talk about the bond and their retreat. I updated the slide because they just established their retreat days, which are the 12th and 13th of March. That also gives council the opportunity to talk about it in April as well as in May. Their first real decision time frame is June this summer, June 2021, where they actually establish the intent of the bond, which is related to parks, and then the amount of the bond. July, they introduced bond orders, which is a legal process of going to the local government commission. And then they actually have to hold a public hearing or a series of public hearings. It's their choice. And then the referendum is actually in October. So I'm going to go through, I have about 12 slides related to the outcomes of the survey. Question one was revolved around the prioritization of factors that was important to the Parks Board when determining projects. The board was closely aligned that social equity was the most important, historic investments, the level of service or access to parks, deferred maintenance, or we also called reinvestment into parks. Like those were the top 4 areas. So most important start at the top, going down, and we only took a snapshot about the top 5 or 6, but equity, reinvestment, access, level of service were the top priorities to the board. All right. It's going to be hard for you to read some of this, but I will send the PowerPoint to the board through Giovanna afterwards. You got the actual results in a PDF, so we just took a snapshot of a few of them. Clearly, equity was most important to the board, and clearly addressing the remaining centers that do not have HVAC in their gymnasium were a top priority. And one thing I wanted to do was just pause to remind the board of where we're at and the delivery and completion of our HVAC systems. Pre-COVID and pre-bond program, the staff did have an ongoing initiative to do about 2 gymnasiums a year. And we had the remaining ones programmed both through our annual CIP and in your proposed 2020 bond. Unfortunately, both the bond was deferred and our CIP was reduced from about $5 million to $1 million. We have used a portion of that $1 million to initiate and complete the design and the bidding of Tarboro. So Tarboro is moving forward. We have used funds to do the design for Method. We do not have funds for to complete Method, Green Road, and Hillsborough at this point in time. Now they're in your bond package, your proposed bond package, but we've also, as a staff, submitted them to our budget office for our top priority request to be implemented starting in July. And our recommendation to, yeah.
Did you mean to say Hillsborough? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Laurel Hills.
Okay,
Laurel Hills.
thank you.
Yeah, we don't have a community center. Sorry, I'm trying to roll through. But our recommendation to the board is to continue to support not only the HVAC systems through the annual CIP, which we have submitted this year, but also in this bond program. That could be a message that Jennifer and Beverly submit in the memorandum to the council, that clearly this is a top priority for the department because we had that money in previous submittals, and as well as moving forward. So question two revolved around your experiences during COVID. So walking, being outside, visiting a playground, outdoor recreation, unprogrammed and open play. Those were common factors that we heard and common responses that we heard from the board. Not surprising because everybody was in their house and they wanted to get outside. This was a really interesting set of comments we heard, though. Although it was important for us to look at not only COVID activities related to the outdoors, when we get out of COVID and we get post-pandemic, it's really important to us to look at a balance of investing in our indoor facilities and continue in-person programming, the socialization of our children and our working with our teens and our seniors. So the board definitely, although that question was around COVID experience, there was a lot of comments around, yes, we liked the outdoors during COVID, but socialization is really important. So a balance between indoor and outdoor. And here was the question that we posed. You can see, use my cursor here. You can see that you are around an average of balancing between indoor and outdoor for future investments. Again, questions related to both balancing indoor and outdoor. And this is a pretty strong alignment in the responses as a board. So question 4 was, how do you, what share of the bond should be allocated towards deferred maintenance, or we'll say reinvestment into parks, or new construction? This had a tendency to skew more towards, the board really believed in, let's take care of what we have before we build new, although acknowledging there are some locations in which we still need to build new parks. Here's just a few comments. Making sure that we invest into existing facilities that we already have, and from an equity perspective. Moving on to question 6, what do you think is more important to the community? Geographic distribution across the city, meaning does everybody get a little piece of something? Or prioritizing investments based on marginalized neighborhoods to promote social equity? It was pretty overwhelmingly that this board responded to this question positively, that we need to focus on social equity and invest in those neighborhoods that need it the most. I will say that we had a few responses to say that is important to do, but we also need to look at other portions of the city that actually don't have very good park access. So there was, again, balance. So when we asked you if you had $100, what would you do with it? It was, again, reinvestment into parks, reinvestment into greenways. You can see proportionally the dollar amounts with the red arrows. And then that we asked you 2 sets of questions in buckets. You know, what were the most important park projects, and what were the most important Greenway projects? This was related to park projects. John Chavis, method, again, reinvestment into park amenities, reinvestment into playgrounds. That continues with the same trend that we've heard before. And here is just a few comments related to playgrounds, HVAC. Let's see, there was a comment that there was board member comments about questioning whether we should consider investing in the Whitewater Park. It was a $12 million project, and one board member wanted to rethink whether that was the right idea, given everything that's changed in the year. Greenway projects. So Greenway amenities, not surprising. In stream banks, we've had some stream bank failures, which has caused closures. We're constantly asked for more improvements to our greenways. Again, restoration of our stream banks and emergency repairs was important to the board. And then finally, related to, we gave you an open-ended question. The board basically supported, you went through a rigorous process over 3 months, lots of meetings, lots of discussions. You heard from the community. The board generally aligned that you liked the process you went through, you liked the list, the number's going to be big, and you believe the number should be big, and that there's a renewed support for our parks because of the pandemic. Now, I'm going to shift gears and pause and go away from the survey, but I'll take questions here at the end. The council did ask you, Giovanna and Oscar had sent a message to you, I believe Wednesday. The city council had 4 calls on Tuesday at their meeting related to a Lake Wheeler rowing initiative. Lake Wheeler has a long history of non-motorized boating. And we currently partner with different universities and rowing groups, and we store some boats on site. Our 2014 plan does acknowledge that the department should consider some type of rowing facility at Lake Wheeler. It does not say that we have to do it. It just says we should continue to promote and work with the rowing community as partners. Staff did a high-level assessment internally, and it does say that we should recommend further study of it, but we have determined that a boating facility could occur there. Let's see, the council asked you to take comments about that. Excuse me. So overall observations, thank you. Overall observations. The board, aligned with the 2020 process and recommendations. We didn't have significant deviation. Of course, this is a pool of 17. It's not statistically valid, but I think the trends show that the board generally aligns with the 2020 process recommendations. Definitely that equity is a top priority, and then reinvesting into the existing facilities. Wanted to send a strong message forward that we need to resolve those buildings that do not have HVAC in their gymnasiums. And then the balance between outdoor and indoor investments. And then it's difficult. The numbers are big. So as we want to do more, those numbers become big. And the board definitely is interested in the council's commitment to, we'll say, a more permanent solution to funding. And so this is just the next steps, working with your comments tonight. We would work with Jennifer and Beverly on a memorandum of what we heard last month, what we hear tonight, what we heard in the survey, and that information will go to the city council for their March retreat. I've shared this schedule with you before, and I'll pause there. So that was a lot of information. So
well done, thank you. I'll just say, Beverly, I see your hand up. I'm just gonna real quick just say, I think maybe we kind of set a little internal time clock of about 30 minutes. We can talk, and then I'll kind of keep an eye on it, and we can check back and see what the temperature is, if we feel like we need more discussion, or if we're kind of coming to some sort of consensus at that time. And also I would just like to kind of remind us all that this is really just a validation of what we did before, and see if we're still feeling pretty good about it. There's a bunch of directions we could choose to go. We could choose to say, we're all good. Thanks, council, for letting us look at it again. We could say, you know, we still support the process we went through, and then we could add some things in a cover memo that maybe highlight a couple things that we might want to just put a little more emphasis on. Or if it's the will of the board, we could really look at sort of reorganizing things. I would personally caution against that because we haven't had much of a public input process this go round. So that would feel a little hasty to me, but okay, I'll put it out there. Beverly, go for it, please.
Well, I wanted to just tackle, so to speak, the Lake Wheeler issue right off, because when I listened to everything that Stephen said, that we as a board reflected in our comments, the two issues of equity and reinvestment, neither of those priorities are really met with the Lake Wheeler improvements. And so I'm glad it was brought. We heard from from folks about that need at a year ago, and considered it, and it ended up where it ended up because of our concern then and our concern now on issues of equity and issues of reinvestment. So I mean, obviously other people have some comments and thoughts, but it seemed to me that it was important to point out that that project does not align.
Thank you for that. Marcia, I saw your hand up too. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
God, I'd done that. I remember when I was on the Parks Board in the 90s, the Lake Wheeler boating people were talking with that board, talking with that group about things at Lake Wheeler. And I know that that's come up, you know, since I've this more recent trip on the Parks Board. And I don't know why. It feels like there's something that needs to be done. It feels like and I don't have the answer. I just want to say, I know historically this has been an issue for a long time, and somehow it needs to be addressed. I looked at the information that was sent today. I listened to the city council presentations that those people made that were recorded. The idea of having some place to store those boats seems reasonable. I don't know if we ask them to help us with fundraising in some way, but I just wanted to say that I think that at some point our board needs to give some attention to that.
No, we do store boats there. So we actually have a secured location for them to store the boats. They want the next generation, which is an actual facility with a classroom and I'll say a much more elaborate building. Right now it's open air. I know, I saw
whatever, but anyway, so just to say, I don't know that this is something we need to do now, but that the fact that the city council paid virtually, to me, no attention to what was said, what those people said until Patrick. I don't believe they would have done anything until Patrick said, let's send it to the Parks Board. So just say, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Marcia. Brad, I've seen your hand up. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback on this only very slightly and only this way. I'm very disappointed because we have been talking about this for a long time. We have expressed almost the exact same conversation every time. And I feel like staff has yet to identify alternate funding sources for this facility. This is a Wake County park. It is 3.5 miles south of the city of Raleigh limits. It is not in the city limits. It's great that it's one of our facilities. It's great that we can do it. But we have been saying for years that this is a need. It's a cool thing that it does, but there's all sorts of funds. There's interlocal grants. There's for bringing in competitions. There's all sorts of other things. And we have paid that. We've known this is a political reality, especially with Patrick on the council, that this is going to get attention paid to it. And I'm really disappointed that we've been talking about this for the entire time I've been on the board. It sounds like for 20 years since, Marcus was on the board last time, and we've never identified alternative funding sources. We've never identified alternative funding partners to help us with this. We have the piece of land. There's other reasons why we can do that. I'm so disappointed that we still can't tell council, get behind Wake County. If you're so concerned about it, tell Wake County you want a facility there. We're happy to provide the land. We're happy to provide the facility, but it's going to be all these neighborhoods that are Wake County neighborhoods all around it. Why don't you ask Wake County to pay for a building? We're happy to provide the land. We've identified the spot for it. We're just not going to give you $10 million for it. I don't understand why we haven't identified these alternative funding sources or provided an answer. And I feel like it's really hard. If I was somebody who was in this community, I would be really frustrated that I didn't feel like I was getting heard. But the truth is that all of us who are looking at the system are like, we got this system with a huge amount of needs and our main focus is equity. And you want me to put a boathouse next to $700,000 houses? Like, no, that is just not our deal. But like the fact that we don't have an answer after all this time of alternative, like it's on a major Greenway path in the future, like that we have this major investment. So I'm disappointed that we've not identified a new funding source for this. We don't have an answer for this. We knew this was coming and we just pretend like it's a long-term capital need for us. And I don't think we should see it as a Raleigh Park. It should be a facility that we have and we own and we have the land for, but any additional investment, I mean, we should lean on other partners, other.
Well, Stephen, Brad, thanks. Stephen, is that true, or have we kind of told some of the users that we expect them to come forward with some sort of a match or to do some fundraising on their own?
Yeah, I can comment a little and I'll invite Scott. So Brad, I've had dinner with this group. I've had lunch with them. We've met with them. We've talked with them. They want us to build them a building. And we've said,
what county can do that?
Right, but we've said, here's locations for funding. It is build us the building we want. And they're a great group, but they're expecting us to do it. So we have, and Scott can share, we've said there is grants you can see. You work with major universities, go to the universities and ask them for money, and it's still, they come to the city to build it.
That's fine. We need to identify alternative government partners. Because at this point, or we just need to say that we're not ready to make an investment in this. This is literally our last priority. I'm sorry. This is literally our last priority. We need to figure out alternative partners. I mean, I don't understand how Wake County's never been at the table. I don't understand any of that's like, I mean, it's just not, it doesn't make any sense. Wake County has a park 2 miles north of this.
Yeah, I have shared state and county. They can call all of them.
Sure, but we
having worked for the county for 5 years, they'll tell them the same answer. They're not going to build a facility.
Brad, are you saying that you feel like it should be in a document, like it should be documented somewhere, or it should be taken out of, like, dismissed it? Because right now it's just a feasibility study. There's no master plan, right?
We did that and we sort of said, well, that we're taking on the responsibility of it. I don't think that we need to be almost concrete in saying that this is not, like, based on every criteria that we've set for a million times. This is just not something, like, we're wasting people's time ultimately. But we could say something to the effect of, we've identified the spot for it. We're happy to partner with you, what that looks like, whatever. But we can't build the building. It's too far down the road.
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll offer a little different comment potentially. If you remember, what they asked for was funding for planning. One of the challenges, and Stephen's right, we've met with them many times. They say one thing that they're missing to go after their own funding is they don't have an image of what it's going to look like and that it will actually work. They say that's their limit. We have pointed them in all directions, county, Wake County school system. We have pointed them in those directions for funding. There had been an interlocal grant submitted for them, I think, 5 years ago to put in a permanent course at Lake Wheeler. So, but they have not been able to take that next big step from their position. They're not able to do it because they don't have the details on what it would be for them to go and fundraise. That's just the position and the conversation we've had with them.
Thanks. Lindsay, I think you had your hand up in the chat. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, question. Please clarify the slide that had the HVAC sources. I'm looking on our agenda and I can't find it. And I'm a visual person and I didn't write it down, so I've gotten lost. If you could either show that or say it and I'll write it down.
Sure, I'll forward it to you. We'll forward it to the board. So we have Tarboro in construction and method designed. We don't have, so for 2 of the facilities, Green Road and Method, we have no funding for. We do have funding for Laurel Hills, but we have other issues. We have water leaking issues. So what our recommendation is to the board is we are requesting as a department in this fiscal year to finish all of them, even though we've had them programmed and they were deferred because of COVID. We've said it's our highest priority to finish these last 2, Green Road and Method. We would recommend that the board support that and support it in the bond. So if it doesn't get funded in July, it would be put in the bond. Does that make, so you're taking 2 approaches, the immediate approach for our annual allocation. And if there is not resources now, you make sure the council knows if you can't fund it now, fund it in the parks bond.
And that's something we feel we could address in the memo. Is that right, Stephen?
Yes, yeah, it came throughout. It was one of the most overwhelming comments in the survey.
So we don't necessarily need to, reconfigure all of our tier allocations. We can just in the cover memo say if it's not handled in the allocation that you're asking for separately, then we'd like for that to be covered in the bond. Right.
So
just for clarity. Okay.
So can I just repeat back to make sure I understood you? Okay, so Tarboro is under construction and then Laurel Hills has funding.
Yes.
And then I heard you say that Green Road and Method don't.
That's correct.
But I know that Method is on the bond, but I don't recall if the Green Road gym is.
It was in the building systems category, which unfortunately the board actually pulled out of not being a priority. So you moved a lot of your maintenance all the way down to the bottom tier or out with the strategy to say you wanted a penny for maintenance. By doing that, you moved Green Road out. So we basically were putting it back into our annual CIP, but then COVID deferred our entire CIP. Does that make sense?
That does. I think I understood that correctly. And then Brad has the valid point, but with it not being funded twice, so I understand that. But if it's in the bond to be rebuild Tarboro, and how long would that take?
Yep. So Tarboro, actually, we are. I mentioned it's under construction to put HVAC system in. It just depends on when funds come for design and construction for Tarboro. Would depend on how long it would take. So I can't give you a definite answer because we don't know when the funds would come and when council would make that allotment.
Okay, and then the bond would be moved likely to March. That's where it's looking like the municipal election would be moving to March. And
possibly, yeah, I've read the same thing, yeah.
Okay, but these would be addressed is what you're saying.
Yeah, even if we got funding right away for Method, the design we've created, you can renovate all of Method and the HVAC that we put in will accommodate the renovation of the rest of the building, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Lex, did you have something you wanted to ask about? Yep, go for it.
Yeah, well, more just a comment, thanks, in response to what Scott was saying in regards to, with the Rose Center, the request coming through to fund the plan, with the thinking that would help secure more funding down the road. And I'm just going to put on my former local government employee hat here and say that I would be hesitant for there to be any agreement to fund any sort of plan without a very clear understanding or written agreement that it is the first step in a process that will then be taken over by further partners. I think, if a city if any government, frankly, but if a city opens itself up and says, we're going to pay for a plan to do this thing, then when that plan's done, you can say, well, then you can go find other. Sorry, my battery's getting a little low. You can find other money to go then do it, but you're going to have people coming back to you and say, well, you spent the money for this plan, so you should be the one to complete the project. And if not, then you wasted money on the plan. So I think that is kind of a red flag for me, to fund a plan without any sort of implementation agreement or understanding in place. I certainly sympathize with what Brad was saying in regards to the location of it being maybe opening itself up to Wake County having more involvement. I think we need to really be careful about what we're funding in planning, with the expectation that we would not be the ones to fund the implementation of the project, countering that with the public perception that if the city of Raleigh is the one funding a plan, then in all likelihood it would be the city of Raleigh that funds the implementation of that project. So that's all I had to say. It just concerned me a little bit.
Thanks, Lex. So in other words, you're saying don't move forward on funding a plan, a master plan for this if we have no intention of actually paying for it in the end.
Well, if we have no intention of paying for it, or if there's not some sort of plan in place for how it would get implemented and paid for eventually.
Right. Yeah.
These open-ended questions can get messy.
Yeah. Beverly, go ahead.
Can Stephen clarify, we did not include this in any tier in our previous. So I think going back and sticking with what we had come up with, we rode this horse down the road before. And
I think we're in alignment. I don't think I've heard anyone say, maybe Marcia was saying, do we need to do something here? Dr. Love, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say that I thought we put quite a bit of effort into the recommendations that we made. And so I would stick with those.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason it was worthwhile to sort of play that out a little bit was because, it does keep coming up. So there was I think there was some confusion, if nothing else, on, so the members of the board of kind of what's going on, why is this going to just continue popping up? Are we ever doing anything with this? And, I think that's fair. And it sounds like, maybe behind the scenes, we need to sort of talk and figure out, what is the strategy of the department for this particular project. But I'm not hearing anyone strongly saying they feel like it needs to be added in any way. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe the list should stay the same. What I've heard in all the conversations, that demand has generally gone up for all facilities across the board. And if that's the case, keep it all the same. And my hope would be we strengthen language asking for more, and justifying a bigger ask, and re-emphasizing the penny or the tax or whatever it is we need.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I saw Marcia's hand and then Brad.
I was just going to say that maybe if we have a couple of sentences that we can give something back to council that says we did talk about the Lake Wheeler situation, and the staff has talked with these folks for a while, and would like, I don't know what the answer is, intergovernment funding for something, but I just to acknowledge that this has been talked about. It hasn't been ignored.
We can do that. We'll work on some statements, definitely.
And I think Beverly's points right off the bat were really good, that it doesn't meet our strong criteria of equity and access and reinvestment.
And there was really more of Mr. Buffkin just wanting to make sure, since it was brought to council's attention during public comment, that there was a mechanism to let the board be aware.
Okay.
Two comments then. Just briefly on this. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm sorry about my snarky comment. But it would be nice if we said we have a plan in place. We would love to help them. We would apply for interlocal funds. We want to apply for funds from a different source as a thing. We want to apply for a grant. We want to apply for non sort of bond, non whatever source. We think this is a cool thing. I think it's fine to say we think it's a cool asset for the city. It just doesn't fit into our bond criteria. Anyway, we want to potentially do that, and we could help them with that type of application. Now we have the plan in place, to Lex's point. We actually could say this is what we want to fund. The second point was the Whitewater Park continues to be an interesting, contentious thing. And so a question that I have is if any of us wanted to switch that out for fully funding the Blue Water projects, since the Blue Water projects are distributed along the course of the Neuse River, they're also Greenway investments because they add comfort stations there along the corridor, and just swapping that in for implementation into that tier. It meets in a lot of the same, it meets sort of a lot of the same criteria as the Whitewater Park, but it's more distributed along the entire corridor, and plus it has Greenway benefits. I just was wondering, since we just finished that plan and it's a really valuable one, if we might want to swap out and say the Whitewater folks, we think it's similar to the Lake Wheeler one. We think it might be a good project, but it might be another alternative funding source. We're happy to work with you on, but here's this other project that can sort of get us beginning down that road, and it's just been finished as a plan in a way to fund it. That was the only thing I thought it might shift in and out, especially with the completion of that plan.
Thanks for that, Brad. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Lindsay, like you were about to say something.
I think that's a good idea. And would that, correct me if I'm wrong, would that be more far reaching in terms of its benefit for the city? Like that's more equitable geographic coverage.
Geographically, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one thing I would add to that is that I think we've heard pretty clearly from Councilman Cox that he is not going to support the Whitewater Park project. So, and it's in his district. You know, I think it's possible it might be pulled anyway by council when it goes to them to be sort of considered. So if we wanted to have any control of what goes in its place, then that would be the opportunity to do so.
Most of the investments are in B. From what I remember, most of the sort of upgrade spots are in B along that spot. There's multiple.
Yeah, B and C.
Anyone else have any thoughts on any, Beverly, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to respond to Brad's earlier comment on that we should help people create the funding or do the feasibility study, and I would not encourage that. I think one of the models that would be the opposite of that would be, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but the triangle swimming.
The feasibility study's done.
Huh?
Feasibility study's done.
Oh, well.
No, we just did an analysis whether it could even be built. The feasibility would get into some preliminary engineering.
Okay, then that's what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about us doing any more work. I was just saying, like, here's a document we have already. We've shown that it's sort of possible.
Okay.
Take that to an application. I don't think we should do any more work except.
Yeah, I don't need
that we will support an effort to get money from other sources on our land.
Right. Let's see. Okay, we have not hit our 30-minute mark yet. Any other comments for our open conversation?
Yeah, it's
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm coming into this, as you all know, is brand new. So I called and I spoke to, I think he's on the call, Ty McCourt, and he helped me digest a lot of this, and I really appreciated that. And so from that fresh eye perspective, because I didn't get the same experience that you guys did in going through, I'm kind of playing catch up. But as we talk about equity, I looked at the projects through that lens. So there are a few that I question. I think, and what this all means, the Biltmore Hills tennis facility expansion that is in District C. I'm not sure that and I just don't know about it, that it fits into that lens that we're looking at, as well as the pickleball improvements. I'm not well versed on why those are prioritized and why those are not trimmed out. There are a few others, but I guess my question is, some of them have 2014 on them. Does this mean that they are a carryover from the 2014 bond? Is that what it's saying? So they've been
That's
waiting
right.
a long time, and maybe that's why it's on there. Kind of, they've been waiting. They were already approved. So I guess I'm opening that for comment or questions, comments, because I'm not sure that I understand everything.
Sure, I can respond a little bit. There, portions of those projects had 2014 bond funding in them, so we wanted to make sure we complete commitments to the community. The Biltmore Hills tennis expansion has been an initiative for about 8 years to create more tennis opportunities in Southeast Raleigh as we partner with the Ebony Racket Club and a youth program associated with it. It was originally looked at for Barwell Road, but we'll say the geotech, we found a whole bunch of rock and we couldn't build it there. So we landed in Biltmore because of the kind of a long running partnership we have with some community members there. And pickleball, it's the fastest growing sport in the United States. From an equity standpoint, although youth play it, it's the fastest growing senior participant. So not only equity of people of color, but age and different demographic as well. And it's probably one of the biggest complaints we get is we don't have enough pickleball courts. And others on this call can chime in on other those projects, but the pickleball community is they're happy with us, but they would love to see more. So
I'd like to comment that Chase is losing its tennis courts, and so Biltmore would be the closest place for people who want to play at Chase. We go over to Biltmore.
Thank you so much for that context. It really makes it clear. I appreciate it.
Great. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? Okay, well, good. So what does everyone think? What's the will of the board? Do we want to make any changes? Do we want to keep everything as is and maybe change some notes in the cover memo to make sure some points are covered? Are we just happy with what we did last year? Beverly, go ahead.
I really, rehearing the News River Blueway plan again tonight and approving that, and I had not given any thought to Brad's suggestion that we sort of swap that out, or at least divide it up in some way, because I do think that if we don't indicate if the News River project gets pulled, if we don't indicate an alternative, we might not have the option of having that input. So I like that idea, but I'm open to more refinement from others.
Anyone else thoughts on that? Brad likes this idea.
I'm a big fan of process, and the Whitewater thing got in there because they followed our process, even though I didn't appreciate how they just splashed the party with nice t-shirts when that project did not even show up on the original list in any way at all. So I think redistributing along the river is a logical thing to do. Even though those access points aren't really addressing the Whitewater Park need in any way at all. It is a different project entirely.
Is there a call for additional parking though at that location? I was just thinking back to the report at the Falls Lake Whitewater access.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
It would be an observation deck, parking, bathrooms.
In the Blueway plan?
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant in the Whitewater plan.
No.
So it's basically improvements at every one of the locations, improvements for parking, improvements for amenities, and then improvements for river access, and then some new locations.
Okay, right. So are there improvements at that particular location? I thought I saw it in there, but I can't recall now.
I'll have to, I can get back to you. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was having trouble with the mute button.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
That was Elizabeth Gardner's group, correct?
That's right. Yeah, they were the ones advocating for the Falls Park development, which is associated with the Whitewater Park. But yes, the Blue Way plan does have recommendations for expanded parking at the existing canoe launch that we have there, which is not a whitewater feature, but does provide public access to the river.
And improvements to the canoe access as well. Isn't that right, TJ?
That's right. Yep.
And they've been talking about that for 15 years, right?
Yeah. It's been a long-standing one.
I just want to make sure I put that out there. 15 years is a long time, isn't it?
Longer than 15. When it
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Before I was born.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm getting kind of old.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think.
I heard Dix is going to ask for more money anyway.
Who's going to? What was that, Kendall?
Dix going to ask about $85 million probably. We ain't talked about that yet, have we?
That's not our job other than lobbying our council.
I know it's not our job. Just put it out there though.
I know, but we can make an impact on how the scale of that by lobbying our counselors.
Yeah.
The right thing to do on that to tamp down them taking the system's money is to lobby our counselors about keeping that number low.
The Conservancy is hoping for 75 million is my understanding in this bond. But I've heard numbers that are closer to 50 that might be where it lands for Dix. So just so you have that in your head, that's probably about how much it would be. Unless we lobby our counselors and try to get that lower.
Our number high, their number low.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave's point was good, on both counts, right? It's we went through a process, we had a lot of public input, we made some decisions, so to just yank something out and replace it with something else feels a little sudden, if nothing else. But, on the other hand, they kind of stormed the castle last year, and I think that did sort of influence the way we voted. So thoughts?
Yes. So there's already been public statements from both council members Bufkin and Cox that they're not leaning towards supporting what we've got now. I'm hoping that the adjustments and improvements to the memo might help them, but it would be disappointing if we did all this and it just got scrapped.
Well, and I mean, that might be a legitimate reason to not tie ourselves in knots about it, because ultimately, it will be, the will of the council, and we can make our recommendations, and maybe we make our strongest recommendations of what we really feel in a cover memo, and we, just let it go a little bit. Christina, I think your hand was up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just asking for clarification, specifically when we talk about counselors and their opinions on this. Do they ever come to these meetings? Does our liaison ever come just to see what we're all feeling and bring it back to council? How does that work?
So Patrick Bufkin is our liaison, and I've spoken with him some, and he has been trying to sort of, he doesn't want to influence anything that we're talking about, so that he's been sort of keeping a bit of a distance for that reason. I thought he might come tonight, but I don't think I've seen him on here.
It goes from here, and then you and Patrick discuss what we all talk about here. That's how that
we have been just the past couple months, just to sort of make sure he's hearing what we're talking about, and I think he kind of follows it, and we of course follow the council minutes.
Right, and then on that regard, if you guys are talking, how does council feel? I know we have opinions, I've heard things, whatever, but since you talked to
Yeah.
And how does what are all their stances?
I think it varies, and ultimately they are elected officials, so they do see things in a little bit more political light than we do, which is why our roles are important, because we're really, more the eyes and ears of the community and a little bit less thinking about reelection. But because they are a little more affected by what projects are in each of their districts.
Right, but how do they feel? So how does Stormy feel? How does the Branch feel? What are your feelings that is it just going to be the two of them that we're talking about, Bufkin and Cox, that are going to vote against it, in your opinion? Or what do you think?
I don't think Bufkin will vote against it. I would be surprised if he did. I mean, what might happen, I think they'll have their working session and they'll go through, and there might be a little bit of jiggling around of projects, but ultimately, what I've heard, and yeah, Lindsay just posted an article here that was in the Indy a couple weeks ago. But from what I've heard, and Brad's always got his ear to the ground, so I'm sure he has heard a lot too. The council is very in favor of the parks bond, and they're looking for ways to, basically get as much in it as they can. And there's a lot of question about Dick's and how much might go to Dick's, and trying to maybe reduce that if possible. But there's a lot of promises to keep out there.
So just so I understand, I'm so sorry to be the last question I have on that.
That's fine.
Sending, that is our communication to them. So that's us saying, this is what we talked about and this is our priorities, in lieu of us having a meeting all together, or us going to their retreat.
That's right. The memo and our recommendations, that's us saying, this is what we think as members of the public that are serving in this volunteer capacity. Okay, and great. Then the council members will meet, and they'll have staff that will also give input to them at that time. And so they may have questions that will be answered at that time, and then they'll make the final decision.
Great. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep, sure.
And a small, tiny clarification. I believe in their ethics policy, they're not supposed to come to our meetings, because they're not supposed to influence our recommendations.
Right. So then the liaison he just talks, the liaison.
Right. They follow what we're doing. We send them official stuff. The liaison has a relationship with the leadership, but I believe based on the ethics policy they adopted, they are not supposed to come to meetings, because in theory, we are supposed to adopt neutral recommendations that they can then process and ask the chair for clarification.
Thank you so much.
I don't want to make Patrick look bad that he's not here. I believe he's not supposed to be here.
Yeah, he's not supposed to be.
Kendall, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I will say, before this COVID happened again, I was talking to somebody last evening that for all of us that were working on this as the PR, we put there was a lot of work into this, a lot of hours, no doubt about it. And so I value people's opinion, but taking sticky notes and putting them against the wall, you got to value that, and that spoke to something. Brad, regardless of Nancy McFarland, she's gonna push Dix anyway. That was her agenda's major, so she's gonna try to push Dix and get all as much money as she can from them. So, but again, I appreciate the work that we did. Hopefully that speaks to something.
Great.
That's again, develop your relationship with your counselor.
I got great one. Yeah.
No, I know, and I'm just saying, like, that's what I've been telling the folks that I talk to is bigger is better. It's not going to change the winning or losing. They're meek about big numbers, but I don't know that a big number is going to really change the winning percentage, because people love our system. So, giving them the confidence that it's okay to go big is probably at this point, from a political perspective, what we as members of the board need to do to make sure we cover all these things. Because I do think that there are a couple of projects that we all want done that are going to absorb a bunch of money on the front end, and a lot of the maintenance stuff that'll make people grumpy about the system won't get done necessarily unless we go bigger. And so that's, I think, the politicking that we have to do is those personal relationships that are essentially like nudging, like, it's okay to go bigger. We haven't done this before. I mean, I think the big transportation bomb is what, 250? Yeah. That's the biggest we've gone, right? And so there's a scaredness a little bit about that.
Well said. Well said.
So help your counselors be confident. That's the best thing you can do over the next month.
Yeah. Stephen, Oscar, do we have a number that was put to the Neuse River Blueway plan implementation? Was that in there if we were wanting to I'm just thinking, I don't know what that number is.
Well, I can say this, it won't be $12 million. That was the Whitewater number. I did send a message to TJ. I don't want to put him on the spot. I know he's on the call, but I can't recall if we had a specific number or a range. But,
Right.
I'm confident it's not the 12 million.
No, we did not develop a specific cost estimate.
Okay.
That would be for, future design phase. Yeah, this was more just a planning conceptual kind of level. Yeah.
We have built one recently at Riverbend. So we have some precedent information and a restroom. So we have some recent data that we could apply to the plan. That would be real.
Jennifer, have we met our 30-minute interaction time?
At this point, we have. Now we're about 10 minutes over that. We're about 40 minutes.
Okay. Well, my recommendation is that we stick with the recommendations that we made. I think we talked about it a lot, and we put a tremendous amount of effort. I'm not sure that council is aware of the number of sessions that we had with the public, the locations where we met them, and all of that. Perhaps if they haven't been informed, that might be included in the memo.
It was, and thank you for that. Yep, absolutely.
It was a really solid memo.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Love. Would anyone want to second that motion?
For a friendly amendment. Just include a note that the Whitewater Park and then Blue Way are sort of interchangeable. Just to note that that part of the city is prioritized and interested, and the investment in the Neuse River corridor is the thing that money is for, essentially. Because if the council hasn't necessarily paid attention to it, they might not know the plan, and I'd love them to look at the plan because it's awesome.
This is Chris. I'd second Dr. Love's motion. Let's just vote on that without that amendment, please.
Sure. Do I hear anyone else?
Friendly amendment would mean the person making the motion can accept it or not accept it.
Well, I would recommend we vote on our motion and then we entertain what he wants to add.
Okay. Go ahead and vote on the first motion.
Yes.
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Any against? Okay, seeing none, that is approved. So was there still an interest in doing any amendment to that?
I support it. I'll second the amendment.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye, raise your hand. Any against? Say nay. Okay, I think I see 4 against. Or no, if you are against, please raise your hand. Okay. So just Chris, Mr. Dillon. So for clarification, that means at this point, we are putting forward a motion. We're going ahead and keeping with our original tier recommendations, but we are adding in the memo that the Falls Whitewater could be replaced with the Neuse Blue Way plan. Is that right? Okay, just to make sure we're on the same page. Okay, that sounds good to me. Is there any other? Are there any other amendments, or we good?
Just a question.
Yeah.
And then we move on to page 15. You're going to include a notation about what Stephen had mentioned about how the HVAC needs would be fulfilled as well?
Yes, that was the intention. Yep.
Great, thank you for confirming.
Yep. And I don't know if we needed to vote on that. Giovanna or Oscar. Okay. All right, good. Well, I'm really proud of us. We did a good job. All right, thanks everybody. so let's see. Let me pull back up. I've got too many windows open. Pull back up the agenda. Okay. Great. Well, that was a really good discussion. I think that was great. So moving on, we don't have any meetings at this time. We'll have them for the next time. Director's report, Oscar.
Thank you. And once again, board, great work on the bond program. Fingers crossed that council will be receptive to y'all's recommendations and that we'll be successful in it for the election. So thank you all once again for all your hard work and engagement on this. Director's report is going to be a little short this month for me. As you all see in your packet, we did get approval for a grant match for some additional work on Rocky Branch at Dix Park. As you all know, we've been applying for grants through us and also to the Dix Park Conservancy for some feasibility work. And we got approval for another grant match out there through the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, which is great news. Also, in our February 2nd meeting, the Historic Resources and Museum Advisory Board received approval from council for their 2021 work plan. So they got their hands full with that for the upcoming year. Also, I'm happy to say that at our February 16th meeting earlier this week, Beverly Clark was reappointed to the PRGAB. So congratulations on your reappointment, Beverly.
Yay.
You had great attendance and the council recognized that.
Okay, goodbye.
Also, you'll also note there is also an update in there about our recreation management system conversion from class over to rec track. And so we still are anticipating a go live date of early March. And you all may have seen in some of our social media platforms and website that we are already starting to put some feelers out there to kind of educate the community on how to utilize the system. So that way, once we do go live, they know what to anticipate and know how to use the new registration system, which is called RecTrack. So a lot of great work being done by many people in our department, as well as some of our partners and IT and so forth. So we're very excited about this rollout that's going to provide an enhanced customer experience for all of our citizens and visitors alike. And then finally, a couple of items that we have out there for input. The public art plan is out and about. So there's a survey out there. So the survey closes February the 28th. And so if you have not completed the survey for that public art plan, please follow the link that's provided in the report, as well as a Greenway master plan. March 3rd is going to be the deadline to do the input for the Greenway master plan. And that's been a long, intensive, extensive public outreach process. So, so far so good. So we're kind of in the home stretch of getting public input on that. And then other than that, that's all I have for this evening. I'll be able to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Oscar? Great. Okay, well, moving on. Parks Committee. Chris, you guys didn't meet, right? He's off. We were talking a little bit about some topics for Parks Committee to discuss, and because I think that's been the holdup there, is that they're kind of waiting for their next topics. So we had talked about maybe looking at some of the older master plans, because that's been coming up during our bond review process, and determining if the older master plans need to be reworked or taken off the shelf in some way. So that's something that might be coming up, Chris, for you guys to start thinking about in Parks Committee. Fletcher Committee, Charlie.
We met on the 9th, I think it was, and we selected the winners of this year's awards. I'll be sending out a Dropbox link to the award winners, or consisting of the award winners, to all of the members of the Parks Board. The idea this year is that we'll be doing another video to recognize all of the award winners. And a part of that, we still want to have board members reach out to some of the award winners. So within the Dropbox link, you will have all of the award winners, their nomination information, And I just ask that if you are interested in interviewing the award nominees who are getting the awards, so that way we can still have that personal touch, just please let me know. And that way we can still include some of that personal information with our awards that we send to the nominees this year.
Great.
So be on the lookout for an email from me tomorrow on that. Otherwise, that's it for this year.
Sorry, what was the question? Someone have a question? No. Okay, thanks, Charlie. Greenways Committee, Beverly.
So we met on the 8th and we talked about Greenway safety. In talking about that, we talked about it in a really broad way about maintenance and upkeep. And one of the really great things about that committee meeting is we had 4 members of the BPAC, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They were, let's see, I have them written down: Liz Hester, Nick Neptune, Susan Hatchell, and Dwight Otwell, who is the chair of BPAC. So it was really great to have them listening in and participating in our meeting. So I do encourage folks to take a look at the Greenway Master Plan survey that's online. I will tell you, it is not one of those surveys where you can just go bing, 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 10, 10, 10, or 9, 9, 9, or whatever. You really do, in order to answer the questions that they're asking, requires that you read the information that is there. So it's a great refresher on that. So, and I just, that's one thing that it came to mind for me when we were talking about the Durant Lake and the flooding issues there. One of the pieces of information that was shared was the information that staff has about storm impact on greenways. And we really would like to see that information is captured in some way digitally, so that to help with our planning on that. And I just want to re-emphasize that to staff. But otherwise, we'll be meeting again in March, and I hope everybody will get out on the Greenway as soon as it is dry.
Yeah. Thank you. Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee, Marcia.
Sorry, we had a really lively meeting about biophilic cities. For folks that missed it, we have been working for a while, been talking about whether Raleigh could qualify to be a biophilic city, and that would be a city that emphasizes being a green city. And so the environmental and sustainability advisory council has been, or commission has also tasked with looking at this issue, and we will be discussing with them and the staff, Scott and Megan Anderson from the sustainability office have been talking about various ways. It's exciting. I feel more hopeful than I had for a while that this might be something that would be an attractive feature for Raleigh. And there's a lot of criteria to meet, and so it requires some city examinations. But the sustainability, help me remember this correctly, I think we're going to have another discussion about it. And the stormwater people are interested in it, and so there's some energy, which is great. Scott, anything I've overlooked that we need to add to? Good.
Yeah.
What about you, Jennifer? Anything else to add?
I agree. That was an interesting conversation. I think folks should join that committee if you're interested at all, because it's got a lot of fun topics. The next ones are going to be on prescribed burning in some of the parks property, and looking at stormwater and ways to coordinate with the stormwater department. on mitigation there. So it's, yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Marcia.
Jennifer, just one.
Yes.
I just speaking of the urban trees that are dealt with in Marcia's committee, I wanted to mention that if you are out on the Greenway, you will see a lot of trees that have been cut down. And so I wanted to tell you why. And that is that they have been addressing, maintenance staff has been addressing, and the urban foresters, the impact of the emerald ash borer, and it has done a tremendous amount of damage to trees on our Greenway, and ultimately will impact all across ash that are planted all across the city. But when you see all these trees cut down, it's a little disheartening. There are plans for replanting, and it's purposeful, not without.
Good to know. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all the committee reports. Lex, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add about the Neuse River Blueway plan. I think we covered that earlier. And you might not be here anymore. Devereaux Meadow Park, I think, is meeting in March.
Yes.
So your first meeting? Okay.
First kickoff meeting in March.
Great. And then Raleigh Youth Council. Do we have any representatives from the Raleigh Youth Council? There's Carmen.
I'm here, and the girls should still be here. Tonight we have Cordelia and Sydney, so they just want to give you guys a quick update.
Great, thanks, girls. You girls can go ahead whenever you'd like to.
Living Death Path. Okay, so I can start off. I know we have 2 upcoming events. We actually have one this Saturday where we're going to do an invasive species removal at Walnut Creek Wetland Center. And we did an event like this earlier this year, and we had so much participation that we actually had to turn down some people. That way it was still COVID safe. So we're really looking forward to doing this event where we can cut down trees and really just get involved to help out the community. And we also have a different volunteering event, which is a park cleanup at Biltmore Hills. And I haven't been there before, but I'm really excited to pick up trash because I know it's a really satisfying way to volunteer. And we're just looking forward to doing these events and staying engaged during pandemic times when it's really hard to volunteer otherwise.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Thank you for that update.
And I also have a few things to add. So our chair of the Raleigh Youth Council, his name is Sam Henderson. He won the Fred Fletcher Award for his volunteering for like 3.5 years all throughout high school. And
that's awesome.
A couple of us participated in the park bond survey. I think it was Cordelia and I actually, and we really just loved to offer our input on that survey. So thank you for that
great.
opportunity.
Thank you for reminding us that you participated. That's awesome. Good deal. Anyone have any? Christina, I see your hand up.
Oh, thank you so much. Ladies, I was just wondering how to best contact the youth council. I'm part of different organizations that would love to invite you to our groups as well. And I'm just wondering, is there a central email? How do I get in contact with you?
For me, email is best. Yes, and I think maybe Jennifer might have my email. So I can also put that somewhere else.
I have it, Christina. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, and Christina, you can email me again, Carmen, if you want to reach out to the council. But if you want to speak directly to the teens, we can put you on a platform where you can meet with our executive board and kind of talk to them about the opportunities that you have. And then that way they can tell you what would be great for the rest of the council. So our exec board kind of meets separate, and maybe you can work with them to kind of see if these opportunities would be something they'd be interested in presenting with the entire council.
Great, I'll email you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, ladies, for your reports. Dr. Love, yes.
I just wanted to say thank you to this group. I'm so happy that you are actually staying involved with us and offering your youth perspective. And Carmen, thank you for the guidance that you're giving to those young people.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. I know we can be a little long-winded at times.
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity for the teens.
All right, we'll move on to Arts Commission. Carol, I think, had to drop off, but I think that she gave a report, Giovanna. I don't know if anyone has that they wanted to read any highlights or just share it later.
Yes, it's in the in board docs.
Oh, Lordy. Okay, I'll close that. Okay, well, we can just look at it later. I'll try to pull it up. How about that while Christina talks about BPAC?
So BPAC, I had emailed them because I thought I missed the meeting, but I hadn't. But then I never got a link. So I have an email. So I don't have an update this month, and I apologize. But I will speak to Dwight and make sure that I get caught up. My apologies.
Okay. And I heard from Dwight, and he was really happy you attended the last time and said that was great.
Yeah, I was really sad. I emailed asking, and they said, no, you didn't miss it. But then I never got a link. So I know that by now I must have missed it, but I didn't know when we were meeting. So I will clarify that. That's clearly miscommunication on my part.
Great, thanks. Okay, I see Carol's report here now. Looks like approved 2 recommended temporary changes to the policy that may unintended funding cuts to organizations impacted by COVID. Approved the purchase of 4 new artworks for accession into the municipal art collection. Special presentation by the United Arts Council of Raleigh about COVID response programs. I'm just hitting real highlights here, and you guys can read this in more detail later. Art and Parks highlight, Make Your Park Interactive Community Project. Make Your Mark is a series of interactive sidewalk murals in neighborhoods and parks throughout Raleigh. Encourage people to draw over and between the lines using the free supplies available in the supply houses positioned at each installation site. That sounds fun. Okay. End of report.
Jennifer,
next.
there 2 locations or for that program. Is the first location is Worthdale Park, and then in March it'll be Roberts Park for those Make Your Mark projects.
Okay, great. That's great. I'll have to go look for those. City of Raleigh Historic Cemeteries Commission. Sally, do you have a report?
Sorry, finding the mute button there. They meet next Thursday, so I should have some more to say after that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Dix Leadership Committee. The last meeting was January 26th, so it's been a little while now, and they canceled the next meeting. I'm not sure why. So my notes from the last meeting in January, some highlights were that Janet Cow is now the new Dix Conservancy CEO. So she was welcome to the group. There were 525 people who attended the last public meeting for the Children's Play Area and Plaza for Dix Park. So good turnout for a virtual public meeting. There was a legacy report from Anne Franklin, who many of you probably know. They had a few requests and endorsements. They were endorsing the movement of the African American Cultural Complex from where it is currently near Wake Med, I believe, to Dix. And there was kind of a lot of talk about that. The transfer of Spring Hill from NC State to City of Raleigh. Interpret Dix's history as a plantation and the role it served in the hospital's history. Okay, and then she talked about a site of conscience as a place of memory. Sorry, my notes are a little scattered here. And then there was conversation about the bond. and discussion about the desire for about $75 million for the bond. And I kind of talked about how we don't have enough money to do that. And, and there's a lot of parks that need a lot of money in the city. And talked about the penny tax. And then we had an update for the playground, and it's looking pretty awesome and amazing. And I think the latest drawings are on the website if you want to take a look at those. So those were the highlights. Are there any questions? And then the next one is Historic Resources Museum Advisory Board. That was January 27th. The next meeting will be next week. So just a couple highlights there. The Pope House, they're planning to actually start working on the landscape plan. They did the master plan for the landscape plan back, I guess, last year. They're going to be starting the construction of that, which is great. And the Black History Trolley Tour sold out very quickly. That's through, I think, the Mordecai House, where they run the Raleigh Trolley. The Moore Square has been trying to kind of do some various events there, and they're doing a story walk through Moore Square, where the walk would begin and end in Moore Square. And essentially they put little pages or little bits from a story throughout, and you kind of follow along and there's interaction. So that sounded really fun. The bathrooms there at Moore Square are only open Friday and Saturday now because of some misconduct. And interpretive signage for Pullen Park and exploring the history of the park. They're creating exhibits for that. Working with a contractor to design and install signs, completing mid-June this year. And Friends of the City of Raleigh Museum is now on Amazon Smiles, if you would like to give money to them. Those are my highlights. I don't know if staff has anything to add to any of that. Chair report. There will be a doodle poll coming out from Giovanna soon so that we can all sign up and find a day that works to do a day of service on the Greenway as the Parks Board. We had talked about that at our last meeting, so look for that coming in the next day or two. So hopefully we can find a day that most of us can get out there and clean up some trash along the Greenway. I believe we'll be doing it at Walnut Creek, starting at the Wetland Center. Although it sounds like the youth already took care of it, so maybe we'll have a different location. And next month, I just was looking at my notes. I think it's the last month for both Chris Dillon and Dexter. Is that true? Chris, I'm looking at you.
At least until they find replacements. If they can't find replacements, we're stuck with them.
Okay. Well, hopefully that'll be the case then. So I'll continue on. That's all I had for my report. Anyone else have any roundtable discussion before we close for the evening?
I had a possible suggestion or a thought. We always observe how our wonderful Raleigh Youth Council members are here and then they're kind of stuck until the end. And wondering if maybe out of respect for their load, especially as students, could we possibly consider moving them to the front after the public comment, just out of respect for whatever they have going on as students?
I think that's a reasonable thing to say. I mean, I think we've talked about it, and the only reason not to was so that they could feel like they could stay and hear the entire conversation.
Oh,
but
and I'm not saying
they can still
they have
certainly
to
do
leave.
that. Yeah, they can still do that,
Yeah.
but that way they are welcome to roll off if they need to.
Yeah, I like
Oscar, did you have a comment on that?
I like that suggestion, Lindsay, because sometimes we go quite long. And if they have homework and things like that, since we meet on a weeknight, that would be an excellent idea. I'd be in favor of that.
Yes, we can
Is he
definitely.
nodding?
Let's hear from them.
Yeah.
I saw some nods.
Yeah, that would definitely fit my schedule well.
I agree.
So then they're welcome to stay, but then if they need to depart for student life loads,
Yeah,
be more accommodating and inclusive for them too.
I think that sounds great. Yeah, I don't think we need a motion on that. That's just something we can organize on the schedule, the agenda, right, Giovanna? Yeah, okay.
Good.
Good deal. Thanks. Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
One other thing, I'm super excited, not sure if anyone else is going to do it, but I love the Raleigh Parks Twitter. And if y'all hadn't seen, I'm just gonna paste a copy. There's a scavenger hunt on Saturday, and my husband and I are really excited to go do that. So y'all should check it out too.
Cool.
I'm just gonna paste the link to the tweet because that's how I've seen it.
Okay. Great, thanks for that. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right. I think we can shut it down then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Thanks for all your work. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good job,
Hi,
Jeff.
everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Have a good night.